Well, good morning. This lesson is titled Knowledgeable Knees and Flexible Feet. It is written to be done in the lying down position, like on a padded surface. It can easily be modified to sit. Your shoes will need to be off. If your foot will need to glide over the floor, so socks on a smooth surface work, or have a plastic shopping bag close by and you can put your foot in the shopping bag, and then it is real slippery as it glides over the floor. So I'm Dotti Harness-Foster, a Feldenkrais practitioner in Homer, Alaska. And this lesson may help to reduce the likelihood of shin splints, ankle sprains, plantar fasciitis, bunions. It's dynamite for getting really connected to how our foot meets the floor and how that movement ripples up through your ankle, your knees, into your hip. So by the end of the lesson, your head may be moving too. So I thank all of you for logging in early so that we can test out things. If your reception is intermittent, you can turn off my video or your video, and it clears up some of the bandwidth, allowing for a non-interruptive communication. So, and all of you are muted, but my husband's here to monitor the chat. You don't need to take notes. I already have it loaded up on my website. And after I get done with class today, I'll also put the audio up. So we're going to start with Skinny Rick. Let me show you the positions. Switching over to the camera. So Skinny Rick is demonstrating what this class will be about if you choose to sit. Okay, you're going to be sitting forward in your seat. I intentionally have his arms up on his head just to get him out of my way, but your arms will be just down at your side on your lap. Your feet are flat on the floor. Your legs are hip distance apart. And we are going to start by just tilting our leg in and out. And what's interesting about what seems to be a very simple move, the camera is going to zoom in and you begin to get a sense of what that does in your hip joint. In fact, you can do that. Just wrap your hand around your hip joint and tilt your knee in and out, and you feel it up in there. Okay. Then we'll be doing different variations of that tilting movement, but at times your other leg is long. So if you're doing this lesson in sit, when the leg is long, it's just off to the side. There's no pressure. Your heel may be on the floor, but it tilts the pelvis in a bit different way. And that mobilizes your pelvis in a really cool way. So, plastic bag. So if you're on a carpeted surface, putting your foot in a plastic bag does the trick so that you can slide your foot away from you and then bring the heel back closer to your chair. I'm going to take the plastic bag off now so you can see what's happening here in the foot and in the ankle. So if you joined me a couple of weeks ago, we had a lesson where you painted the floor with your foot. This is a very similar movement where the sole of your foot stays on the floor which mean all of these bones, really zooming in to see the bones of the foot, all these bones have to make little adjustments as you continue sliding. And then as you bring it back, you're warming up and mobilizing also these two muscles in this joint in the ankle and the connection up into the tibia and fibula and zooming out to the knee. So one of the things about the connection between the knee and down into the ankle, towards the end of this lesson, I'll be prompting you to dial into a really stable foot, and I'll reference the front and the heel. And the reason why that's so important, when your foot is right underneath your knee, the two shin bones come down, and if I'm putting just a chopstick here to represent how this goes down, and look at it goes down here to the front of the heel. So that's a really stable position for us. So we're going to be seeking that out. We'll also be exploring different movement, different positions of our foot as it glides across the floor. We'll be hinging our foot. And one of the most interesting, zooming into the foot, is taking the pad of your big toe toward the floor, and you can just see this opening up all the bones in your foot. Oh, it's amazing. And then the little toe. So I'll coach you through all of this, and then we're going to be making a circle. It's one of my favorite lessons because you can do it just about anytime, anywhere, little bits and pieces of it. So I want to show you what this looks like for those of you lying on the floor. Let me get the chair out of the way. So, like I mentioned before, the lesson is done and written in the lying down position. I intentionally pick lessons that can be modified to sit and be just as effective. So what's interesting, you're in the seated position, your body is like this on a sturdy armless chair, which is very, very similar to your knees are bent and your feet are standing. And the advantage to lying on the floor is you'll feel it, some of these movements into the pelvis more so, and zooming in, you may see how the ribs move when we do this movement. So the knees begin to tilt the pelvis, the chest, and even up to the top of your head. So let's see, anything else that I need to show you? I think we're done with Skinny Rick. So I'm not sure if I mentioned to you that the chat is open. My husband monitors the chat, and in it I have a book recommendation. It's also on my website, so you don't necessarily need to take notes. So we are going to start, your choice. Standing is the preferred. Sitting also works well. We start an awareness through movement lesson with a scan, like how do we feel at the beginning of this lesson? If you choose to sit, when I talk about the sole of the feet, the sole of your feet is your pelvis. So zooming out, you can put your hands at the base of your pelvis and Those two sits bones, those are going to be your sole of your feet. So as you come to a standing position, your feet are hip distance apart. And notice the direction that your toes are pointed. The right toe, the left toe. And if you had to stand there for a long time, which leg would be your most dominant, your most available, the most stable leg to stand on for a while? And adjust your weight from one leg to the other. Notice how you roll across the sole of your feet. And then taking your awareness to the sole of your right foot, roll your right foot to the outside and then to the inside. Just a few times, get a sense of rolling across your foot and then bring it back to its neutral home. And do the same with the other foot, rolling the left foot, the sole of the left foot to the outside and then to the inside. The whole sole of the foot stays in contact with the floor. And then come back to your home, your neutral, and transfer your weight into the ball of your feet. Your heels stay in contact with the floor. Notice how your pelvis comes forward. And then transfer the weight into your heels. And it tends to take your pelvis back a little bit and your head forward. And do that a couple of times. The entire sole of the foot stays in contact with the floor as you do this. And then walk around a bit. I know that we're in our kitchens or living rooms, wherever. So do your best to walk around and notice how the sole of your foot rolls over the floor. On the right foot, what is the last toe to leave the floor as it pushes off and propels you forward? And then take your awareness to your left foot. When do your knees bend? And put your hands on your hips. Notice the movement in your pelvis as you're walking. You can put your hands on your ribs, get a sense of the movement in your ribs, and come to a comfortable stance and lift one foot just off a bit. So you're transferring weight to one leg, lift the other, and then switch back and forth. What we're doing here is trying to figure out what is your best, most available, most stable leg, because the lesson begins with you starting on that best, most available leg. So, and if you don't know, you just pick a leg. So let's get started. Come to your starting position, which is either lying on the floor or sitting. And note what is your most comfortable leg. Bring both of your knees are bent and both of your feet are standing. Your legs are about hip distance apart. And begin to tilt your most available knee in and out. It's a very gentle, slow movement. And if you put your hand around the outside of your hip, you'll sense how the femur, that big bone in our thigh, comes up into your hip. You'll also get a sense of rolling across the sole of your foot. And at this point, we're keeping our pelvis pretty quiet. And then leave that foot in the standing position. Wrap your hand around the other hip and tilt the other leg. Tilting the knee outward. Notice how you roll to the outside edge of your foot. As your knee tilts inward, you come toward the inside edge of your foot. And now going back to our best, most available leg, keeping both feet in the standing position. Now allow your pelvis to participate. So you're taking your best knee, tilting it outward and inward, but encourage your pelvis to participate. So as soon as the pelvis begins to participate, you may find that your chest, your ribs, you may even be tracking the movement of the knee with your head. Allow everything that wants to participate with this tilting of the movement of the knee to come along with the tilt. And let's go to the other side, tilting the other knee in and out, actively asking the pelvis, the ribs, the head to come along to this tilting party. For those of you lying on your back, you may feel that as your knee tilts outward, more weight comes to that same side of the back of your pelvis. For those of you sitting, the weight tends to transfer into the same side of the sits bone. As your knees, both knees come to center, your weight is evenly distributed between both sits bones if you're seated. If you're lying, it's evenly on the back side of your pelvis. And let's take a rest. So we rest often in the Feldenkrais method. You don't need to wait for me to take a rest. The rests are as much of a physical, but I think in this lesson, it's a lot of mental because there's a lot of things I'm asking you to pay attention to, and that's challenging. So, now, on our next step, we're going to stick with our most available. Our best side is going to be the tilting knee. The other leg, if you're sitting, your knee is extended out, your heel is just touching out on to the side. If you're lying on the floor, your non-available, not the best leg, is just extended long, okay? And tilt your best knee. It's standing, you're rolling over the sole of your foot, tilting your knee in and out. And allow everything to participate in this movement. So as your knee tilts out, you get a sense that the pelvis wants to go to that same way along with the head and chest, but not quite so much because your long leg is anchoring your pelvis off to that diagonal. And if you don't feel that, you can bring that long leg back to standing and get a little comparison of the effect of the long leg. And now let's switch side. So you're bringing your other knee, bending it, bringing that foot to standing. The one that you were just tilting is long or off to your side. And repeat that movement of tilting the knee in and out. So you're rolling over the sole of your foot. So you come to the outside edge as your knee tilts out, coming to the inside edge as you tilt your knee in. And allow your hips, your chest, your head to track the movement of your knee. And notice that your pelvis tends not to move quite as much when that leg is extended long, because it's anchoring it down there at a diagonal. So feel free to compare what this movement feels like by bending that knee and bringing that second leg to stand, tilting your knee, allowing everything to move, and then extend it back long again. And you get a sense of how that truly is anchoring your pelvis at a diagonal, which totally makes a different movement of this coming up into your hip. Wow, a lot of things to think about. Let's take a break. So zooming in, I'm going to demonstrate, and the camera is going to zoom into my feet, and I'm going to demonstrate some of the next moves coming up. So you're going to lift the forefoot closer to your shin. It's a tapping movement, like if you were tapping along with some music, but this tap is the slowest song you can imagine. So this movement is activating all of the muscles along the front of our shin, the front of our ankle, the bottom of your foot. And then we're going to reach the big toe out to the side and reach the little toe across to the inside. So this is activating all of the muscles and the ligaments and the tendons here on the side of our foot. And I almost get a sense that my foot is making a crisscross movement, while all the bones and the tendons in the bottom of my foot are just, whoa. So you need to be easy and take this small. If you get a cramp, you just wiggle it out. You could switch legs. You could imagine the movement. And then we'll also be taking our little toe to one side, and then arching, making an arc, and then taking the big toe down. And notice how my knee stays softly directed toward the ceiling if you're lying down, or directed forward if you're sitting. Okay, so that's a little bit of where we are headed. So it's your turn. Come to, both of your feet are standing, your knees are bent, your legs are about hip distance apart. Take your most available side and begin tapping that foot. Tap, tap, tap. It's a slow movement. The heel stays connected with the ground. It's a tapping movement. So you're bringing the top of the foot closer to your shin, and do this many, many times. Each time you do this, you're extending the muscles across the back of your shin, expanding the muscles across the bottom of your foot, using the muscles on the front of the ankle to bring your forefoot closer to your shin. And let's switch sides. Your other foot, the heel stays in contact with your floor, the floor, and bring your forefoot closer to your shin and set it back down. And repeat this movement many times. Up and down, up and down. And let's activate the movement of the pelvis with this. So as you bring your foot up closer to your shin, allow your pelvis to round backward. You're looking more at your lap. As your foot goes back flat to the floor, arch your back a little bit. You're looking up, your belly button comes forward. So take it slow enough so you can track that movement. If you're lying on the floor, as you bring your forefoot closer to your shin, your back wants to press into the floor. As you tap your foot down, your back wants to arch a bit away from the floor. Take it slow enough so that your whole system has the time to go along with that up and down movement. And let's switch sides so that the other foot is taking the lead, tilting the pelvis back, looking down towards your knees, your lap. As you set the foot down, your pelvis tilts forward, arching, opening up this movement of the throat. Take this movement slow so that you can get a sense of when the forefoot comes close to the shin, your back rounds back closer to the back of your chair or pressing into the floor if you're lying down, and the foot comes flat to the floor. You come to sit through your sitting bones, arching yourself a bit forward, belly button coming closer. Now let's do that with both feet. So both forefeet come closer to the shin, rounding yourself back. The feet come flat to the floor, arching yourself forward. And repeat this many times. You may get a sense that this movement is a bit more clear for you when both feet are participating. So at this point is the front of the feet that is in the driver's seat of this movement. And let's take a rest. Resting, lying on your floor, your legs are long, your arms are by your side. If you're sitting, you're just giving yourself to the seat, and take a mental break. So if you are on a carpeted surface, our next step, you will need your plastic bag. So come back to your starting position. One foot is standing, that knee is bent. That's your best, most available leg. And the other leg is long. So if you're seated, it's just long and the heel's in contact with the floor. If you're on a carpeted surface, put your foot in a bag, set it back down. It stays in contact with the floor as you glide your foot away from you. Your standing foot goes away, and then the heel comes back closer to your pelvis, your buttocks. And continue this movement, taking it slow enough so that the pads of all 5 toes can stay in contact with the floor. And the heel comes back closer to the legs of your chair. If you're lying down, closer to your buttocks. And continue this movement. Allow everything else that wants to participate, allow that to move. Your long leg, the tension is out of your long leg. Those of you lying on the floor, you may get a sense that your head must bob a little bit, tracking the movement of your foot. And let's switch sides. So the other foot is standing in a plastic bag. If you're on a carpeted surface, the other leg is long, off to the side if you're sitting, and slide the standing leg out. So the sole of your foot stays in contact with the floor, and then the heel comes back closer to your buttocks. And continue this movement. I'm going to take the plastic bag off my foot so those of you who like the visual can see what this looks like in the sitting position. The entire sole of your foot stays in contact with the floor. And notice how this feels with the leg long. Your pelvis tends to want to anchor itself a bit at a diagonal. Allow everything else to move. The only constraint is that your foot stays flat on the floor, the one that is sliding. The knee is directed toward the ceiling if you're lying on your back. Your knee is directed forward if you're sitting. And let's take a break. Give yourself to the mat. If you're sitting, just give yourself to the seat. And come to the slide with all three directions of the ankle. Okay, on your screen, I like this drawing. I don't know if it helps you, but this is a drawing that illustrates some of the different angles that our foot can move in. We've done some of it already. Our next position is going to be keeping our knees somewhat still and moving this across the sole of our foot. So it's a small movement. It's a small movement. If you cramp up, you just shake it out, switch sides, take care of yourself, only do what's easy and comfortable. So come to your starting position with your most available, your best leg is standing, that knee is bent, the other leg is off to the side. If you're lying on the floor, it's just lying long. And you're going to keep your knee directed toward the ceiling if you're lying, or forward. The knee stays still. Now roll the sole of your foot to the outside edge. So that edge near the little toe. And then roll the sole of your foot to the inside edge towards the pad of the big toe, and go back and forth. So now with the constraint of keeping your knee somewhat quiet, this encourages more movement down in your foot, down in your knee, down in your shin. So it's a small movement. You can barely see it. For those of you sitting, if you take your hand and wrap it around the outside edge of your knee, you can feel this movement radiating up into your knee. For some of you, you may be feeling it all the way up into your hip. Now come back, make that movement smaller and smaller until you come to where that standing foot feels really stable. You can press the pad of the big toe, the base of the big toe into the floor, the base of the little toe into the floor, wrong drawing, and your heel. And now pick up your foot, go back to that drawing, and take the big toe to the outside, and then crossing over, take the little toe to the inside. Again, it's a very small movement. You're reaching the base of your big toe to the outside and the base of the little toe to the inside. Your knee stays, I'm going to say, softly quiet, so that this, when you take the big toe is out, all the muscles in the bottom of the foot are having to engage in order for this movement to happen. All those 27 bones in her foot are having to move around themselves. I think of my foot being like a rubber raft in rough seas, because my foot needs to mold around the rough waves. And now take your little toe to the outside and your big toe to the inside. So now the sole of your foot is making this like an arc shape. The knee stays directed toward the ceiling, the base of the little toe tapping to the outside, the base of the big toe tapping to the inside. And when you're done with that, shake out your legs, your feet. That's a lot. So I want to read for you, while you take a rest, a quote from the book that I have in the chat. Highly recommend. But I think this is really applicable. One sentence. We can eliminate a lot of the muscle tension in our body by using awareness to spot how we often, without intending to do so, tense and use muscles that are not necessary for that movement. And the reason why I feel this is so applicable right now, we're using the delicate muscles in our feet, and we often tighten up our jaw, or I do. So we're going to be switching sides and focusing on that quote. So come to your other leg is bent knee, the foot is standing. The other leg is long, heel out to the side if you're sitting. If you're lying on the floor, that leg is just long along the floor. Your hands are in your lap or by your side if you're lying on the floor. And let's start, bring your forefoot closer to your shin and set it back down. Keeping your heel on the floor, you're bringing the top of your foot closer to your shin and setting it back down. It's a small movement, but allow your pelvis to participate. So as the forefoot comes closer to your shin, allow it to tilt your pelvis back, rounding your back. And then as you bring your flat foot back to the floor, tilt your pelvis back through the neutral. Your belly button may even want to come forward a bit. So take it slow enough so that you can round your back when the forefoot comes up, and you can even arch forward a bit when you set the foot flat on the floor. Forefoot comes up, rounding, looking down towards your lap, your knees. Foot goes flat to the floor, arching your back, opening up your throat, taking the tension out of your cheeks. Those of you lying on the floor may feel this movement rippling all the way up your spine. You may be getting a little bob in your head. And now bring your foot to the neutral starting standing position. And we're going to take your big toe to the outside. Lift your foot up and then take the little toe to the inside. Lift your foot up, big toe to the outside, keeping the knee directed softly toward the ceiling, switching back and forth. Those of you sitting, it's really interesting to put your hand on the outside of your knee and you feel the movement of the tibia and fibula, your two bones in your shin, moving about in your knee. And now take the little toe to the outside and the big toe to the inside. So keeping the only constraint is to keep your knees softly directed toward the ceiling or forward. So there's not much movement in the knee, so that encourages the movement in your foot, your ankle, and all 27 bones in your foot plus 2 in your shin. Woo! A lot of things happening. Take the tension out of your cheeks, your jaw, and let's take a break. So when we take a break, you just give yourself to the floor. If you're lying on the floor, your arms are by your side. If you're seated, take a mental break. This is a lot to think about. But we're coming towards the end of this lesson. We begin to put all of this together. So zoom into my feet. I'll show you the next movement. It's going to be, we'll start out bending the knee of your most available, good, stable leg. Is flat on the floor. The other leg is just out. We're going to first slide our foot away from us and bring the knee back to our chair, similar to what we did before. So you may want your plastic bag. We're just going to do that a few times. Then we bring our foot to standing. We're going to tilt our knee and then place our heel underneath our knee and circle our foot. And I'll prompt you through all of this. So now it's your turn. Come to your starting point. With your most available knee is bent, that sole of the foot is flat on the floor. The other leg is just out, giving its weight to the floor. If you're in a carpeted surface, put your foot in a plastic bag so you can slide your forefoot away from you and then bring the heel back closer to you. So we're combining a lot of steps. So allow your pelvis to participate. As the heel comes back closer to your pelvis, let it round your back, pressing your back into the floor. As your foot goes away, your back tends to want to arch, opening up your throat. Do this several times, really exaggerating the movement. It's basically the sole of your foot is in the driver's seat right now, but it's driving your whole body. And then bring your foot back to that starting position where the flat foot is right underneath the knee, and tilt your foot in and out. Tilt your knee in and out, just like we did at the very beginning of the lesson. Wrapping your hand around the outside of your hip, but also letting everything participate. So your head contract the movement of your knee, your chest, your torso, your eyes, everything is involved, and the knee is in the driver's seat. And make this tilting movement smaller and smaller till you come to that spot where you feel that the sole of the foot is flat on the floor. Press your heel into the floor, the base of your little toe, the base of your big toe. And now the slide where we're circling. Lift your forefoot and circle your forefoot. So we're combining a lot of these movements. As you circle the forefoot, allow everything to participate. So you may get a sense that your pelvis is making a circular movement, your torso, your chest. Those of you lying on the floor may feel a little circle happening with the back of your head that contacts the floor. And change the direction of your circle. The only constraint here is that the knee is softly directed forward if you're sitting, or directed toward the ceiling if you're lying. So even the leg that is long can be rolling and moving. Switch directions if you haven't already. And let's take a break before we do the other side. Shake it out. So in any awareness through movement lesson, Moshe Feldenkrais called it a constraint when he said in this lesson, keep the knee forward. With that being the only constraint, everything else can move. So coming back to your other side, bending that knee, the sole of the foot is flat on the floor. It may be in a bag if you're on a carpeted surface. The other leg is long, and begin sliding that foot away from you, keeping the toes in contact with the floor. So as you take your foot away, round your back, you're looking down in the direction of your knee. As your heel comes closer to your pelvis, allow it to bring your pelvis forward and opening up your chest, giving a little arch in your back. And at your own pace, continue sliding your foot forward and bringing your heel back towards your pelvis. And after you've done that several times, leave your knee in that standing position and roll, tilting your knee in and out, roll across the sole of your foot. Just like we started this lesson, and make that movement smaller and smaller till you come to a spot where the sole of your foot feels flat on the floor. And you may want to press in, get a sense of that. And now lift the forefoot and begin making a circle with your forefoot. So again, allow, now the forefoot is in the driver's seat. So allow the tension to get out of your legs, not only the leg that is working, but especially that leg that is long. Let it just be supported by the floor. Then it frees up your pelvis to be tracking this circular movement of your foot. Change the direction of your foot if you haven't already. allowing the chest to move. You're breathing freely. Your head can be tracking the movement of your forefoot. In fact, what's fun is let your head take the control. Let your head take the control and let your foot follow the head. Oh, switching directions. We're at the end of this lesson, so that if there's any other little things that you want to do, anywhere from the sole of your feet to the top of your head, now's a good time to give it a try. And we end an awareness through movement lesson by coming back to where we started. So back to standing if that's how you started, or in your dynamic seated position. The feet are flat on the floor, hip distance apart. And take your awareness to your right foot, coming to that slide that, and press the base of your big toe into the floor, the base of the little toe, and the front of the heel. That's where you're structurally supported when you're standing. And do the same on the other foot, pressing the base of the big toe, base of the little toe, the front of the heel, so that now you have two tripods that you can rest your stability on, and get a feel of what that feels like, the stability. Check in with your knees, your pelvis is above your stable feet. Notice the position of your torso and where you look out at the horizon. And transfer your weight from one side to the other. Your feet stay flat on the floor for right now. You're just shifting your weight from one stable foot to the other. And only if it's easy and comfortable, as you switch to one side, lift the other foot off the floor just a tad, get a sense of the stability on one foot, and then transfer your weight to the other foot and bring the other one up a bit. So this is a real slow movement, transferring your weight from one side, lift the other foot, slow it down, and then transfer your weight to the other foot, lifting the other leg. And walk around a bit. If you're seated, you can walk in your seat. Get a sense of how you roll across the sole of your foot. Notice the movement in your ankle, your knee. You can put your hands around your hips. Get a sense of the movement in your hips, the movement in your ribs. If I invited you for a walk on the beach, would you want to come along, even if that beach was really pebbly and boulders? Or you can imagine yourself walking a trail that's all rooted up and you're having to step and meander over slippery, knotty roots. Do you feel that you have the stability to do that now more easily? So this lesson is brought to you again on Saturday. What is that? November 7th, I think is Saturday. Yes. And the value of repeating is huge. Next week, we're going to be doing bending and standing steady. It is one of my absolute favorite ahas. Of course, I love all of these. So these classes are brought to you totally free. by the American Parkinson Disease Association and the Homework Council on the Arts. So if you feel that this has been helpful, be heartful and consider a donation to either one of these organizations. Like I mentioned before, I highly recommend the book that's on your screen. It's also in the chat. I put it on my website, The Brain's Way of Healing, The Remarkable Discoveries and Recoveries from the Frontiers of Neuroplasticity. I shared a quote during this lesson with you from this book, but it might really clear up a bit of how our brain communicates with the rest of our body. It's fascinating work.